Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. Welcome in, y'all. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. Auburn week, right? Deep South's oldest rivalry, Georgia, will take on Auburn on Saturday, 3:30 kick on CBS. And it's on the road, Georgia's first road test. We actually had our live show earlier this week, and I'm going to play a segment for that to end the show here with former Georgia Bulldog tight end Arthur Lynch. We do that every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We have the links for those shows on our social media, UJ Football Live on Twitter, myself, JC Shelton _. You can find that there. Also on Facebook, Instagram, we'll have the link on our profile there as well, UJ Football Live. So if you can, be sure to check that out. Me and Artie, we do a long preview as well as give our thoughts on the season as a whole, offense, defense, all things dogs. We talk about college football as well and the big game, big matchups, postseason implications each week. So we break that down there. But I wanted to jump in and tell a couple of stories here about this matchup, right? So Georgia has had Auburn's number recently, of course. And Hugh Freeze's first season here for Auburn. Wanted to touch on a story that Aaron Murray shared with the Players Lounge this week. And if you don't know about it, you should. This is one of my favorite stories, and I bring it up every year we play Auburn. But basically, so Auburn and Georgia played, and in 2010, Ben Jones, former Georgia center, Aaron Murray, the quarterback there, and Nick Fairley. Everybody remembers that game. A couple of games, Nick Fairley took some cheap shots on Aaron, but this one in particular, he landed on Murray, and Nick Fairley's a huge guy, right? He's like 6'5", 330 plus, whatever, when he was playing for Auburn. He landed on Murray, shoved him into the ground. Murray couldn't feel his whole left side when he went back to the huddle. And he goes back to the huddle, in pain. Like I said, he couldn't feel his left side. And Ben Jones is there, the center, and a mauler Ben Jones was. And he still was that in the NFL for a long time. But Jones had dreadlocks in his hands. He had ripped the dreadlocks out of a middle linebacker's head during the play, and he actually asked Murray, hey, I have some dreads for you. And Murray's like, well, I'm trying to call the play, right? He's got a job to do, even though he's hurting over there. And Jones had dreadlocks in his hands, and Murray had to tell him, it was Fairley that hurt me, not the middle linebackers. So Jones shoves the dreadlocks in his pants, plays the rest of the game, fortunately a loss for Georgia, and then hangs the dreadlocks on the ceiling of the living room. And I think he was rooming with Aaron and Travaris King, friend of the show, at the time. So they were hanging from that living room ceiling for a bit. So I always love that story. It really speaks to this rivalry. It's a physical game. It's going to be a physical game on Saturday. And, Georgia's first road test, like I said, Carson Beck's first SEC start. And I'm definitely going to include a segment at the end of this here going into this game with our live show with Arthur Lynch. He tells us, what it's like playing in Jordan-Hare Stadium on the road in such a rowdy environment. The tension is going to be high, right? Because this is Hugh Freeze's chance to really set his tenure at Auburn off right. The 3-1 coming off a loss to Texas A&M last week. Offense isn't really moving. I mean, Hugh Freeze will probably get that working here in a season or two with his regimen and how he's performed in the past with SEC offenses, but it's not that way right now. But that defense is tough. They're going to play Georgia tough. That crowd, like I said, is going to be a big part of this in the first part of the game. Can Georgia overcome that? How does Carson Beck perform at the beginning of this game with the crowd and the noise they're going to have to face as his first road start of his career? How is that offense going to perform with their nonverbal cues? Do they get that off well? There are some miscues early with that? Because I think it's really big for Georgia to get out early in this game, take the crowd out of it, and get working and have that crowd leave in the third quarter. That would be the perfect storm for Georgia. It's a 14-point line, actually moved from 16.5 when Artie and I recorded on Tuesday night. So a lot of people taking Auburn in this. I like the dogs here, and I'll include the segment when Artie and I give our predictions as well. But I wanted to share that story and give you a couple updates as well beyond just those Tuesday information that we had to go off of, especially injuries here. Ladd McConkey's been back practicing. More came out at the end of our segment on Tuesday night from Kirby Smart. Not giving us much, you know how Kirby is, kind of a hopeful to play kind of thing. But McConkey just got back to practice this week. I don't see him going, just my guess. Javon Bullard told the players down this week that his ankle is feeling better, much better, and he's going to be back sooner rather than later, sooner than as expected, I should say. So I'm not sure if he'll play, but that is good news. And he's a very, very big piece of this Georgia defense who the secondary has played well without him, but can they do that moving forward as the schedule gets tougher? Really the off-season hype we all heard about it was how pitiful, quote, quote, Georgia's schedule was this year. But we talked about it in the offseason. That can change in a week or two, right? Because it's the beginning of the season, you don't know how teams are going to play. Obviously, unranked opponents become ranked opponents, and that's where Georgia is right now. Read a stat today that Georgia is actually tied for second with the most ranked matchups ahead currently. Obviously, we know Florida, Tennessee are up there in 2022, I think, is their rankings. Florida at 22, Tennessee at 21. Missouri is also ranked. Kentucky also ranked. So this is going to be interesting. The rest of Georgia's schedule, tough schedule in the SEC, in my opinion. I think Florida, Kentucky, Missouri, those are really physical teams. Tennessee, not as physical, but of course they have that offense, that high-flying offense, and it's at Neyland Stadium, right? So something to look out for. So that's why I think this big game here Saturday might not jump out on the stat sheet. It's a 2-touchdown favorite, so it's not as close as you think it might have been in the years past as far as the spread here. I think really Georgia has to make a statement here. And I think it's big for Carson Beck to get confidence, this offense get confidence, as well as the defense. It's missing a couple of guys, but I think they play well. And I'll leave that prediction for the end of Artie and I's segment I'm about to play here in a moment. Make sure to check out that live show. We appreciate you guys viewing that on YouTube, the Pulse Sports Network, as well as listening wherever you get your podcasts, as always. So I'll throw it to us, Artie and I, next for a little clip of our live show. Already talking about playing at Auburn and Jordan-Hare in that SEC road environment and what difficulties Georgia may face in that. Before we get into the numbers, I want to throw it to you, Artie, again, and let's talk about, we need to use this from you a little bit more, I think, in these shows and get the most out of you. Use you to the fullest here.
I got you.
Man, take us through playing on the road. I know you played in that stadium. Maybe take us through anything that stands out, whether it be the locker room situation, how they set up the field and where they point you guys to go for your warm-ups and what have you. The crowd, obviously, it's one of the hardest places to play in the SEC. Rowdy guys. It's in Alabama. They have nothing else better to do. Let us know, Artie, what that is going to be like for these guys going into a game where this would make Auburn's season to upset Georgia, and it would put Hugh Freeze on a path to keep his job at least a little longer, bar none.
Yeah, totally. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Is anytime minus one school, and I think we can all figure out what school that is. Every single university that is part of the SEC, their stadium atmosphere on a game day when things are feeling right, each place is tough to play, right? That's just the way it is. At Auburn, their visitors' locker room actually isn't that bad. There are locker rooms across the league that are horrendous. Tennessee is one of them. I hate Tennessee through and through. It's just like it is.
What's
what
about
it is. It's just small. There's the bathroom is a dump. There's really no showers to stalls, no bathroom stalls. Everything's crammed. There's no place to sit. It's just kind of a mess. And the state, anyway, I can go on for days about how Tennessee is a tough place to play. But when you're thinking about Auburn, right, and you're thinking about playing at any one of these stadiums in an away game, the best thing that you possibly can do is start fast and take the crowd out of the game, right? Two stories at Auburn. Because of the realignment back in 2012 and 13, we had to play at Auburn 2 years in a row. In 2012, we beat them up. I think we beat them 38-0. And then the next year was the infamous Bobble Hail Mary Yeah.
Oh.
So, but tale of two teams, right? We go into that, and granted, we were a very good team in 2012. Obviously, it's well documented. Auburn was not that good that year. It was 2 years after their national championship year. But long story short, we go into that game. It's a night game, 2012. Crowds roaring, everyone's going nuts. We're ranked, I think, third in the country, fourth in the country. They want to upset it. So not too dissimilar to what we're doing right now, right? We go into that stadium, and without hesitation, we're up and down the field scoring, right? It's 7-0. Todd Gurley runs. Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall, Tavares King. We were all making plays, and I think the stadium was half empty at halftime. We won 38-0, right? But we took the atmosphere right out from under them, right? And we never let them get momentum behind them from their home crowd, right? Conversely, right? A year later, different scenario. Obviously, Auburn was playing for a lot more, but it was a 3:30 game, much like this one. It was so loud at the kickoff. We could not. If you go back to the game film, you can ask Aaron Murray about it. We're in gun, and we're just trying to get the handoffs and snap the ball, and we could not move for the first 3 drives because none of us could hear the snap. And every time we would basically turn our heads to look at the head bob to make sure we get it, I had D Ford just humming past me. And I'm just like,
dude, he was a mammoth too.
Mammoth. And so, and obviously we ended up finishing the first half pretty strong, and we ended up taking the crowd out from under them, ending the first half. Obviously, the rest is history. We know what happens. But if you think about that, I get it. Every scenario is different. You know, if they're undefeated, they're playing for a championship, what have you. But at the end of the day, these crowds can make a huge difference. A huge difference. Another instance, when we were playing Auburn, but home, Bakari Rambo, 2011, pick 6. We were kind of in a battle for, I think it was like a 14-7 game or 21-7 game. Rambo picks the ball off and pick 6 it into the end zone in Sanford Stadium. And all of a sudden we have the crowd like screaming bloody murder because we just got a pick 6. And and next thing you know, Auburn just kind of lays down. We ended up beating them by 30 or 20 or something. So when you think about like home field advantage or playing at a hostile environment, there's so many things that crowd can do to get you off your game. It's very easy to say, hey, these guys, they're SEC players, they should be able to handle it, blase. Totally get it. And there are contingencies in place for us to be able to handle the crowd noise. But when you got a Jadavion Clowney or a D Ford or a Eric Berry lined up alongside or a Von Miller across from you, and you can't even hear yourself think, and you're trying to see if we're running a hot audible or if we're switching to a zone or if we're switching to play at line of scrimmage, things can go haywire. So my piece of advice for Carson Beck and the offense: start fast, start strong, take the crowd out of the game as soon as possible, and make sure those student section is emptying out and going to the bars at halftime and not going for refills and going back to their seats because it's a close game going into the second half.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, dude. I love those stories. That is perfect, man. Guys, that is really, really good assessment from a guy who did it to just give you an idea. And I love that, just hearing that from you already. Tell us a little bit about that because we're not there. You know, we don't have that experience. So that's really awesome to hear. Speaking of bars, it is a 3:30 kick, so they're not going to be that sauced up for this one. Maybe that's an advantage for Georgia. But as far as playing in that, you know, that really made me think, and it put something in my head that I haven't thought of until we just got on this call. Is my assessment of this game is, you know, this obviously is the first road game for Georgia. Beyond that, it's Carson Beck's first road game in a hostile environment. He's played on the road at times, but it's been in garbage time when the crowd's already out of the game. How does he respond? How do those silent count? How do those cues go with him, the offensive linemen, the receivers and such, the running backs? is it efficient enough to really get up on that team early? That'll be something to watch out for, something I'll be closely watching for. Before we get into numbers, let's go injury report really quick. I'm going to give 2 updates on really important guys. Ladd McConkey, we haven't seen this season yet, dealing with a nagging back. I heard him a little bit last year, was able to play through it. They're holding him out of precaution. I think it was worse than last year, just based on how Kirby Smart's talked about it, and how he was actually shut down from participating the last 2 weeks, which we just found out about this week. Kirby was actually asked about that tonight, and I'll give you a quote here. Quote, "I don't know. He did some things. He ran routes. I saw him some, but I didn't get to see him enough to really judge. And I just want to watch the tape." Smart said, "We're just trying to progress him back slowly, whether it's this week in a role or in the future. I'm not trying to rush him back." Guys, doesn't sound like he's going to play. You look back at George Pickens and A.D. Mitchell. They were ready before they ended up coming back. I really see this as a later in the season, maybe Georgia Tech kind of thing for Ladd McConkey. That's just my guess. Of course, we've seen guys come back earlier. No one knew they were going to come back and such, but that's just my guess from knowing this team and Kirby Smart. Javon Bullard actually told the Players Lounge this week. I wrote a story on it earlier. If you guys want to check it out, the Players Lounge, go to the Georgia page. It's up there. So he actually told us that his ankle was doing a lot better, and he actually is expected to return sooner rather than later. He thinks he'll be ready. So whether that's this week or next week, not sure. That's what he gave us. So that's what I wanted to pass along to you guys. Something to note, Georgia's injury list, the longest that Kirby Smart has seen in his tenure, and the longest Ron Corson. And I misspoke last week saying Claude Felton. It's Ron Corson who's the head of the medical staff. I misspoke. I realized that after I jumped off the call. But he's been there for a long time. He said it was the longest injury report Georgia's had. I think that it has affected him. I think it's notable to really keep a mind out for these things and these players that could come back in the future, and the guys are not going to have for this week. So I think, when you think about this game in Auburn, right, they have wins over Samford, Cal, and Mass. Not the level of opponent that they're going to be facing this week, not the level of opponent they faced last week in Texas A&M. I was watching that game pretty closely in preparation. 27-10 loss at A&M. Tough place to play. I get it. It's a noon kick, though. Only touchdown scored was a fumble recovery. So that offense still has a lot of work to do under Hugh Freeze. Do I think he'll be able to do it in the future? Sure. I think they're going to be winning games here in the future with their offense. But right now it's that defense that's going to give Georgia trouble. I don't think the offense will. Before I move to that defense, I do want to note a couple of offensive things here. Passing game is really what holding them back. 173 yards per game. Really down there in the rankings. Peyton Thorne has struggled. The transfer, wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot of Robbie Ashford this game. I think they're better as really, Artie, you could speak to this as well. Maybe even a triple option kind of thing, old school Auburn, not old school, but when you were playing Auburn in the day, maybe something like that from a gun with Robbie Ashford as a running back, as a rushing quarterback, because they have Jarquez Hunter, who's a tough running back, really talented. Maybe that opens up for him a little bit more if they use Robbie Ashford. But I just don't think Thorne's going to really be able to do much against this number 1 ranked Georgia passing defense, minus their best player in Bullard, right? They haven't had him a couple games, and they're still right there in passing defense. Defense is tough. Like I said, 167-yard passing allowed per game, one of the tops in the SEC. Haven't been as tough against the run. That's where A&M got them last week in their first SEC game, 134 allowed per game. Up to that point, 209 to A&M. I do like linebacker Eugene Asante. Got 20 stops, 2 sacks this season. Somebody to watch out for. Artie, first thoughts on this game. We can go ahead and jump in predictions. Add anything you'd like, and we'll end it with your predictions. I'll note the line is Georgia minus 16.5 right now, over under 46.
Yeah, so he obviously has an interesting history, Hugh Freeze, but a successful one as a football coach. He really was the first one to get Ole Miss up and running in my lifetime, at least my lifetime of really watching college football. So he is a very capable coach, and I think he's a hell of a recruiter. I think he's showing that. So I think in the years to come, Auburn is actually going to be in very good hands. But with that being said, I just don't I don't necessarily think that they have the depth to really go, toe to toe with an SEC, a real SEC opponent, right? A&M, for all of their flaws, they have a ton of talent and they have a ton of depth, and but they're not a very well-oiled machine. They still handily beat them. I spoke with somebody who's kind of an Auburn donor, knows the team very well, knows the coaching staff very well, spent time with the coaching staff, and they even said, they're like, our guys play hard, and you can see that. They went out to Cal and beat Cal in like a 14-10 game, and so I think he has the team believing, but the coaching staff themselves, based off the person I spoke with, they just don't have the guys right now. And when it's very tough to play a team like Georgia, no matter how emotionally charged you are, no matter what the atmosphere is like. If you just don't have the depth and the weapons to go toe to toe with a team like Georgia, it's very hard to compete. So I think Georgia's going to play very well. I think it'll probably be a little bit back and forth for probably one quarter, and then I think things just start rolling in Georgia's favor about halfway through the second, and then probably around 21-7 going to the half, and then ends up being about, my guess is 38-14 or 44-14, something like that. So I think Georgia wins big, but I do think the first quarter probably looks a little bit more competitive than people would like, and I think that will probably have to do with what Hugh Freeze can do from a play calling perspective, off the script, and then ultimately just kind of the atmosphere that is, Auburn.
Yeah. So you said 38-10. What'd you say? 38-14?
I think it's going to be like 44-14. I bet you like 21.
So you like Georgia to cover, and
what's
the
the spread?
Spread 16.5, and the over/under is 46.5.
Yeah, I like.
So you got them. Yeah, you got them covering.
It's only 16.5.
Yeah. I think Vegas is really banking on this SEC road game for Carson Beck. The way he performed in UT Martin in his first game. This is basically his first game, kind of over again. Obviously not, specifically, but
that makes sense. Makes sense.
That's just my guess. But for me, I think a few things will happen. I think you're going to see Georgia not respect these receivers at all. I don't think they're going to respect the passing game at all. I think they're going to mix up their coverages really. I think they're going to get a pick, maybe two. Thorne, if they keep him in and let him pass, he's thrown three picks to 4 interceptions. 3 picks to 4 touchdowns this year already. Georgia leads the SEC in interceptions. I think they get a pick in this game or two. And I think that respect that they don't give to the receivers really forces them to run the ball, which Georgia is so good at doing. But I do think you see those rush yards start to pile up in the second half for Auburn, because that's really what they're going to be able to do at the only thing. And I see this offense for Georgia. I think I see a slow start here, man. I'm not going to lie. I think the nerves a little bit, maybe for Carson again. I think he gets over it. I think the Georgia offense gets over it, establishes that run game eventually. So I do like your thought about the first quarter battle, maybe first half battle. But I think Georgia pulls away. Like you said, they don't have the guys. So I like 30-10 Georgia. I'll take the under, and I'll take Georgia to cover by 3.5. So I like 30-10 in this game. Guys, it's been great. Arthur, thanks again for joining us here, trying to get this up and running. Hopefully we'll get on during people's routine. Maybe join us on Tuesday nights at 8 Eastern the rest of the season. We love doing it. We'll post this in a different format on the YouTube channel in case you missed. I'll add some things into it, maybe another segment from myself. I also go off on Spotify and Apple. If you miss it there, you can listen every week. UGA Football Live on Twitter, UGA Wire. I have words there. Also editor for the Players Lounge. Making sure to check us out, original content each week. Arthur, it's been great, man. Have a good night. Also, one thing I want to leave you with: go Braves and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.